I'm selling your car. You're too old to drive it.
Of course, bring the buyer tomorrow.
Why are you smiling?
Because when that garage opens, you'll discover you don't control anything anymore.
I'm selling your car, my daughter-in-law announced on the day I retired. You're too old to need it. I smiled and said, "Of course, Vanessa, bring the buyer tomorrow." What she did not know was that the car was no longer in my garage. And by the time those doors opened, she would discover that nothing in my life belonged to her anymore. Hello, my name is Margaret Hale. I am 65 years old, and for 38 years, I worked as an accountant in Columbus, Ohio. Numbers taught me something important: people can lie, signatures can be copied, and smiles can hide ugly intentions. But eventually, every account must balance. Mine balanced on a cold Saturday morning with a stranger standing in my driveway and my daughter-in-law screaming beside an empty garage. But to understand that moment, I need to take you back 6 months. My husband, Robert, died 4 years before I retired. We had been married for 39 years. He was patient, practical, and able to repair almost anything with an engine. The blue 1967 Mustang in my garage had been his favorite project. It was not just a car. Robert and I took our first long trip in it. We drove it to Tennessee on our honeymoon, brought our newborn son Daniel home from the hospital in it, and later taught Daniel to drive in an empty church parking lot. After Robert died, I kept the Mustang covered and drove it only on clear Sundays. Whenever the engine started, I could almost hear Robert laughing beside me. Daniel understood what that car meant. At least, I believed he did. My only son had always been gentle, but he hated conflict. 3 years before Robert died, Daniel married Vanessa. She was polished, confident, and charming when other people were watching. At first, I tried to love her as a daughter. Then the small comments began. "Margaret, this house is far too large for one woman. Margaret, older people should not manage complicated investments. Margaret, you really should let family handle your passwords." Each sentence sounded like concern. Together, they formed a map leading straight to everything I owned. After Robert's funeral, Vanessa became especially helpful. She sorted my mail without asking. She photographed insurance papers in case they got lost. She persuaded Daniel to put a location tracker on my phone. If I objected, she widened her eyes and said, "We're only protecting you." I wanted peace with my son, so I tolerated more than I should have. Then, 6 months before retirement, I noticed a charge for $4.28 on a credit card I rarely used. It came from an expensive restaurant in Cincinnati. I had not been to Cincinnati. I called the bank. The representative told me the purchase had been made by an authorized user. "Who is the authorized user?" I asked. "Vanessa Hale." I had never added Vanessa to that card. I asked for a copy of the authorization form. When it arrived, my name appeared at the bottom in a shaky imitation of my signature. For one painful minute, I tried to invent an innocent explanation. Then I remembered every paper Vanessa had placed beneath my hand while saying, "This is only for insurance," or "Sign here so Daniel can help in an emergency." I did not confront her. An accountant who discovers one false number does not shout across the office. She checks the entire ledger. I opened a new notebook and wrote one word on the cover, TRUH. Over the next several weeks I reviewed everything: bank statements, property records, insurance policies, credit reports, and online accounts. What I found made my hands turn cold. Vanessa had changed the mailing address on one investment account to her house. She had attempted to increase the limit on my credit card. Someone had contacted my insurance agent, asking whether Daniel could be added to the Mustang's title. The agent had refused because I needed to sign in person. Then I found something worse. Inside a folder on my study desk was a photocopy of a durable power of attorney. It claimed that I had given Daniel control of my finances if I became incapable of managing them. My signature was at the bottom. It was another forgery. The document had not been filed, and it was not valid. But somebody had prepared it for a reason. That night I called my son, Daniel. "Has Vanessa discussed my finances with you?" He became quiet. "She worries about you, Mom." "That is not what I asked." He sighed. "She thinks retirement might be a difficult adjustment. She said we should be ready to help." "Did you authorize her to contact my bank or insurance company?" Another silence. "Mom," Can we not do this tonight? Vanessa has had a stressful week. There it was, his usual escape.
Not yes, not no.
Just a door quietly closing between us. I ended the call and cried for 10 minutes. Not because I felt weak, but because I finally accepted that my son's silence was helping someone hurt me. The next morning, I made 3 appointments. The first was with my attorney, Linda Cho, a sharp woman with silver glasses and no patience for manipulation. I showed her the false signatures and unauthorized transactions. Margaret, she said, this is not overprotective behavior. This is financial abuse. Hearing those words aloud felt like stepping into freezing water. Linda helped me revoke every questionable authorization. We placed fraud alerts on my credit files. I moved my savings to new accounts at a different bank. I changed my passwords, installed cameras, and stored my important documents in a safe deposit box. Then I signed a valid power of attorney naming my younger sister, Ellen, who lived in Michigan and had never asked me for $1. The second appointment was with a real estate attorney. Robert and I had already planned to leave the house to Daniel one day, but I changed the arrangement. Upon my death, the property would be sold, and most of the proceeds would fund a scholarship for older adults returning to school. Daniel would still receive a smaller inheritance, protected in a trust that Vanessa could not control. I was not trying to erase my son. I was preventing his fear of confrontation from giving away my life's work. The third appointment was with Frank Morales, Robert's oldest friend. Frank owned a restoration shop outside the city. I handed him the Mustang's keys. Keep her for me, I said, and do not tell Daniel. Frank studied my face. Trouble. I believe someone plans to sell a car that does not belong to them. He nodded once. Then we'll make sure they cannot. Frank transported the Mustang to his secured shop that same afternoon. In its place, beneath the gray car cover, we left an empty space. I should have felt safe after taking those steps. Instead, the mystery deepened. 2 weeks later, Vanessa arrived carrying groceries I had not requested. She moved through my kitchen as if she owned it, opening cabinets and criticizing my food. Too much salt, she said. At your age, you must be careful. Then she looked toward the hallway leading to my garage. Have you driven the Mustang lately? Not recently. Good. Those old cars are dangerous. She smiled, but her eyes stayed fixed on the garage door. While I made tea, she went to the bathroom. My security camera showed her leaving the hallway, entering my study, and opening 2 desk drawers. She photographed something with her phone before returning to the kitchen. That evening, I checked the drawers. Nothing seemed missing, but the spare garage remote had been moved. Now I knew the Mustang was not merely one item on her list. It was the next item. I told Linda everything. She advised me to continue documenting the behavior and to avoid being alone during any confrontation. We also contacted Detective Harris, an investigator who handled financial crimes involving seniors. He reviewed the evidence and said, "We need to know how far she intends to go." The answer came on my retirement day. My coworkers held a small party at the accounting firm. They gave me a watch and a cake that said, "Nandu you can I generate TLORAMCOK." I laughed, hugged people I had known for decades, and drove home in my ordinary silver sedan. Daniel and Vanessa were waiting inside my house. That was my first surprise. I had changed the locks 3 weeks earlier. Vanessa must have used the spare key Daniel once kept for emergencies. Or perhaps she had copied it before I changed the lock and Daniel had let her in with his new one. She stood in my living room beside a bottle of champagne. Daniel looked uncomfortable. "Congratulations, Mom," he said. Vanessa hugged me with one arm. "Now your real rest can begin." We drank 1 glass of champagne. Then she placed a folder on my coffee table. "We need to discuss practical matters," she said. Inside the folder were brochures for assisted living communities. I stared at her. "Why would I need these?" "Not today," she said. "But soon. This house has stairs. You live alone. You still drive. We need to simplify things before there is a crisis." "We?" Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "Vanessa just means the family." Then she delivered the sentence she had probably rehearsed. "I'm selling your car. You're too old to need it." She was referring to the Mustang, of course. She claimed it required expensive maintenance and said an old vehicle was unsafe for a retired woman. I already found a buyer, she added. A collector. He is coming tomorrow morning with a cashier's check. I looked at Daniel. You agreed to this. He would not meet my eyes. It's probably best, Mom. And what price did you choose for my car? Vanessa named a figure less than half its appraised value. I almost laughed. Instead, I smiled. Of course, Vanessa, bring the buyer tomorrow. Her face brightened with victory. She pushed a paper toward me. Just sign this agreement. I put on my reading glasses and studied it. The form claimed Daniel was acting as my agent under a power of attorney dated 3 months earlier, the forged document from my study. So that was why Vanessa had been searching my drawers. She had left the photocopy behind, but apparently possessed the original false document. I will sign tomorrow, I said, in front of the buyer. Vanessa hesitated. Why wait? Because after 38 years in accounting, I do not sign financial documents after champagne. Daniel nearly smiled. Vanessa did not. 10 o'clock, she said. Please be ready. The moment they left, I called Linda and Detective Harris. Then I called Frank. Is the Mustang safe? I asked. Locked inside the shop. Good. Tomorrow, I need you to bring me something else. At 9:30 the next morning, a flatbed truck stopped behind my house. Frank unloaded a battered, rust-covered shell of an old Sen from his scrap yard. It had no engine, no seats, and no wheels. We pushed it into my garage on a small rolling platform and covered it with the same gray cover. Frank laughed. Robert would have enjoyed this. He would have brought popcorn, I said. At 9:50, Linda arrived and waited in my kitchen. Detective Harris parked down the street in an unmarked car. I placed copies of the evidence on the dining table. At exactly 10, a black SUV turned into my driveway. Vanessa stepped out first, wearing a cream-colored suit and a victorious smile. Daniel followed. Behind them came a nervous-looking man named Mr. Collins, who carried a leather case. Vanessa introduced him as the buyer. He has the full payment, she said. Once you give him the keys, we'll handle everything. Before we opened the garage, I said, may I see the sale documents? Mr. Collins handed them to me. He seemed polite, and I quickly realized he might be another person Vanessa had deceived. He believed Daniel legally controlled my property. The proposed sale price was even lower than Vanessa had told me. The payment was to be made to a small company called VH Family Solutions. VH Vanessa Hale. Not $1 was intended for me. I looked at Daniel. Did you know the money was going to her company? His face lost its color. What company? Vanessa snapped. It is only for tax purposes. I turned to Mr. Collins. Did you personally see the car? Only photographs. He answered. Hale said it belonged to her husband's family, and they had authority to sell it. Vanessa grabbed the garage remote from her purse. She had stolen it during her grocery visit. This is becoming ridiculous, she said. Let's show him the car. She pressed the button. Nothing happened. I had reset the garage opener weeks earlier. Her smile tightened. The battery must be dead. No, I said. The permission is dead. I entered the new code on the wall panel. The door began to rise. Everyone stared at the covered shape inside. Vanessa hurried forward and pulled away the cover with a dramatic sweep. Under it sat the rusted shell. For several seconds, nobody spoke. That is not the Mustang. Vanessa spun toward me. Where is it? Somewhere you cannot reach. You agreed to sell it. No, I agreed that you could bring the buyer. Her face changed. The polished mask disappeared, and something furious took its place. You confused old woman, she shouted. Daniel has power of attorney. He controls the vehicle, the house, and your accounts. You cannot hide assets from your own family. Daniel stared at her. That one word told me he had not known the full plan. I walked back into the dining room. Everyone followed except Vanessa, who stayed in the garage for a moment, as if the Mustang might appear if she stared hard enough. Linda stepped out of the kitchen. Good morning, she said. I am Margaret Hale's attorney. Vanessa froze. I laid the genuine documents on the table. The power of attorney you used is fraudulent, I said. It was never notarized by the person named on it. The signature is not mine. The valid document names my sister Ellen, not Daniel. Daniel sank into a chair. I continued. My accounts have been moved. Every password has been changed. The Mustang is stored under my name at a secure facility. My property plan has also been revised. Vanessa pointed at me. You cannot prove I made that document. Perhaps not from the document alone. Detective Harris entered through the front door, which Linda had left unlocked for him. But we also have bank records, security video, emails to the insurance agent, the stolen garage remote in your purse, and the sales agreement directing payment to your company, he said. Vanessa stepped backward. Mr. Collins closed his leather case. She told me the owner had dementia. I felt Daniel's eyes on me. You said that, he whispered. Vanessa looked from him to the detective. This is a family misunderstanding. No, I said quietly. A misunderstanding is arriving at the wrong time. This was a plan. She turned to Daniel. Tell them your mother forgets things. Tell them she asked us to take control. He covered his face with both hands. For years, my son had chosen silence because silence felt easier than courage. That morning, silence finally became unbearable. He lowered his hands and looked at Detective Harris. She asked me to sign papers, he said. She said Mom had agreed. I never read all of them. Vanessa hissed his name. He continued. She also used Mom's credit card. I knew about the restaurant charge. Vanessa promised she would repay it, and I did not tell Mom. It was not the apology I deserved, but it was the first honest thing he had said in months. Detective Harris asked Vanessa to come with him for a formal interview. She was not dragged away in handcuffs. Real justice is often quieter than television, but the evidence followed her, and this time, she could not talk her way around it. Mr. Collins apologized to me and left. Linda remained while Daniel sat at my table staring at the forged paper. Mom, he said, I didn't know she planned to take the house. But you knew enough to ask questions. Tears filled his eyes. I was afraid my marriage would fall apart. So you allowed me to become the price of keeping it together. He had no answer. I told him he needed to leave. Before he walked out, I gave him the name of a counselor and one condition. If he wanted a relationship with me again, it would have to be built with truth, boundaries, and time. The investigation lasted several months. Vanessa eventually pleaded guilty to attempted fraud, identity theft, and unauthorized use of my credit account. She was ordered to repay the money, perform community service, and remain under supervised probation. A protective order barred her from contacting me or entering my property. She also lost her business license after investigators discovered that VH Family Solutions had been used to receive money from 2 other questionable family transactions. Daniel filed for divorce. I did not celebrate the end of his marriage. Revenge that requires another person's suffering never stays sweet for long. What satisfied me was simpler. Vanessa lost the control she tried to steal while I kept my home, my money, my name, and my right to choose my own future. Daniel and I did not repair our relationship overnight. For nearly 4 months, we spoke only through our counselors. He paid back the restaurant charge himself, even though he had not spent the money. He gave me every key to my house and signed a statement describing what he knew. Most importantly, he stopped asking me to forgive him quickly. One spring morning, almost a year after my retirement, he met me at Frank's restoration shop. The blue Mustang waited outside, shining in the sunlight. Daniel stood several feet away from it. Dad taught me to change the oil in this car, he said. I remember. I forgot what he taught me about people. I looked at him. He said love is not agreeing with someone all the time. Sometimes love means standing in their way when they are doing harm. For the first time, his apology sounded complete. I handed him the passenger side key. You're not driving, I said. He laughed through his tears. Fair enough. We drove out of the city with the windows down, returned slowly, mile by mile. But that day, I allowed hope to sit beside me. Retirement did not make me smaller. It did not make me helpless, invisible, or ready to surrender the steering wheel. It simply gave me time to decide where I wanted to go next. I now volunteer twice a week with a local organization that teaches older adults how to recognize financial abuse. I tell them to protect their passwords, read every paper, check every account, and never confuse control with care. And sometimes, when someone asks about the empty garage that exposed Vanessa's plan, I smile. She believed age had made me easy to move aside. She believed my silence meant surrender. She believed that opening my garage would prove she controlled my future. Instead, those rising doors revealed the truth. The car was never the most valuable thing she tried to steal. My independence was. And that is the lesson I will carry for the rest of my life. No one gets to take the wheel of your life simply because they have decided your journey is over. My journey was not over. I was just getting back into the driver's seat.